Shogun episode 6 is out, and this was probably my least favorite episode. Of course, least favorite for this show is still solid, but this is the first one that I felt like kind of threw off the pacing of the story, and I'm not sure how much of it was completely necessary. Outside of a couple pretty important parts, a lot of it just felt kind of meandering. There'll be spoilers. The big takeaways from this episode are mainly that Toranaga has decided to take power for himself because there's no other choice, or at least he's framing it that way because he's kept this desire for power secret. And the other big part of the episode is the background between Mariko and Lady Oichiba, which I think I called her Oichiro last week, so my bad on that. And this is the part for me that I think is kind of meandering. Maybe it'll be more relevant in the next couple episodes, but for now, this just kind of felt like a deviation from the main plot, which is steadily moving forward and building, and then it felt like we kind of sidestepped with this one. The other big thing for this episode is that Ishido takes the other regions hostage and has now kind of laid his power grab bare, partially in thanks to the push from Lady Oichibo. And the tension from Oichibo and Mariko is because Mariko's dad killed her dad. So let's get into it. The intro is a few minutes long, and it's Mariko meeting Ruri as little children. They become friends, and we kind of get like little time jumps where we see them grow up together. And then Mariko walks in, sees her dad killing people. Obviously pretty traumatizing for her, and kind of the impetus for her whole backstory. And you see she has some background in fighting. Obviously she's mentioned over and over wanting to avenge her family. And we saw a little bit of fighting from her in episode 3. So here's the background for that, where we see that she actually did train to fight, at least to some degree. And we see Mariko getting married off to Buntaro, and she views this as a kind of punishment, like her father is almost exiling her, when, based on what we know, it seems like he was trying to get her away from what was about to happen so that she could at least live on. We can see she's kind of dwelling on this line that your duty is what endures. And we can see, obviously in the show, she's made that very clear what her priorities are to John over and over, just regarding how much she puts into the rituals, how much she puts into her duty, and how much she kind of feels like she has to believe in it. The second part of that statement is there is nothing more. And this is kind of what John touched on last episode, that there should be some part of her that's okay with wanting to enjoy her life or have something that's for herself, not just living all of her life for other people and rituals and obligations and these sorts of things. And this episode is called Chapter 6, Ladies of the Willow World. And this is referring to, obviously, the brothel. We spent a pretty good amount of time there, where John is being given a very high-end courtesan or prostitute from Toranaga, because Toranaga is kind of tired of John's attitude of wanting to leave. And the Ladies of the Willow World are essentially supposed to help you forget all your problems and that sort of thing. It's more than just sex, is the explanation that we're given. So right away, John's getting another promotion, and now he's Chief Admiral. He's being given the Cannon Regiment. Toranaga gives him this high-end prostitute. He says this is all because John saved his life again. To me, it seems like he just really needs John's technology and kind of as an ally for the war that's about to happen. And this is a little sidebar, but if any of you watch anime and you've seen the show called Trapped in a Dating Sim, John kind of reminds me of Leon in that show, where he just wants to kind of blend in, live a comfortable life, not really do much, but the king keeps spitefully promoting him, and he gets more and more pissed off each time because he gets more responsibilities that he doesn't want. Obviously, in that show, it's done very comedically, and this one, John is like, give me a break, like I just want to go home. So we go, and Oda is salty that the Cannon Regiment got taken from him and given to the Barbarian. And Yabushige is like, we had bigger problems. Thousands of people just died. The army's in shambles. Ishido is going to destroy us. And he even says, time to write another will. So it's a pretty bleak situation for them because of the earthquake. We get a brief scene where Mariko and John are both praying with a dividing wall between them. And they're both saying a Christian prayer. And it seems like we're supposed to take away that they still do have things in common. We get Buntaro apologizing to Toranaga, and he's talking about how Mariko kind of drives him crazy, and that she's always been ice, always been bent on revenge, and he thought that she'd be grateful for him asking her to live and stay alive, but she's just frozen him out completely. And he also seems a little bit bitter because she seems more comfortable around John than him. And Toranaga says, stay away from her for an entire week. And Toranaga actually suggests divorce, and he's like, not now after all these years. And it's interesting because I feel like this is a pretty good portrayal of a guy who does seem to care about her. I was going to say he expresses it poorly, but obviously he abuses her. So this kind of unhealthy dynamic they have, I think this is a pretty interesting portrayal of it. I mentioned it a lot, but I love how much of this show just communicates through expression. When Buntaro leaves and he sees John and Mariko next to each other, he gives John a look like he fucking hates him. And they just kind of look at each other for a second, and then he's on his way. But it's very apparent what he's thinking without saying it, making a big scene. So John and Mariko come to talk to Toranaga. John's like, I don't understand why you keep giving me these titles and gifts. I don't think I can do the job that you required me to. I just want to go home. So John again asks for his ship back, and he's like, look, let me go attack the Portuguese. I'll attack the black ship, mess them up economically, because if I do, that'll be less issues for you down the line when the Portuguese inevitably turn your country. And Mariko argues with him and says it's not in his best interest. And John's like, I thought you were just going to translate. So there's like a nice little kind of bickering thing they have going on there, like they're a couple, even though obviously they're not because of all of the circumstances around their relationship. And it's kind of funny because Toranaga's like, why would I attack an ally? And John's like, they're not an ally. They're here to extract wealth from your country until it's no longer convenient. And then they start arguing again, and Toranaga actually calls them out. He's like, why are you guys arguing? And then John, being kind of passive aggressive, is like, as my translator and nothing more, I would appreciate if you just translate what I said. And this is an interesting conversation after John leaves between Toranaga and Mariko, because he's like, what's going on with you two? And obviously she denies it and says it's only words. And he's like, I can't afford infighting with all this shit we have going on right now. So he orders her to take him to a brothel, and he's like, you go with him in case he talks while he pillows. And this thing I found interesting because I feel like there's a few ways you can interpret it. One is he wants John to find another woman and kind of get rid of whatever's going on between these two. Another is that he just kind of wants to get a reaction out of her and see what exactly is going on, because obviously he noticed something, and he's noticed it the last couple episodes. And I think there's also the possibility of him just kind of wanting her to acknowledge it. And I can't even tell if he would care if they were in a relationship if it wasn't for Buntaro, who he also just suggested divorce to. So to me, it seems like he's just kind of doing whatever he can to get them unified for this war. But this little dynamic I found interesting because I feel like you could interpret it a few ways. Maybe it's more clear in the book what it is, but for the show, I feel like there's a few reasonable interpretations. Like the fact that he's wanting her to go watch him sleep with someone else could be obviously to break them up. Maybe he's expecting her to join. I don't really know. And here's another little part where they communicate a lot with just expressions. Because when he says to go to the brothel, she's like smiling and being polite. And then he goes, and you join him in case he talks. And you can see her face just kind of falls like, this is bullshit. But obviously she can't say no. So we cut. Ishido's area is on fire. All the birds that fly to communicate are burning. Toranaga's second in command takes a horse and goes so he can relay to Toranaga what's happening in person. And Toranaga's wife has to stay behind, along with the pregnant chick, because they just can't get out quick enough. And the pregnant woman can't ride on a horse, obviously. And we get more here between the monk and the eminence guy. And he's like, Ishido claims that there's a plot to kill the heir, so he's locking everything down in Osaka. So that's the guys he's using to essentially hold all the regents hostage, get them to vote for a replacement regent for Toranaga, and then get the 5 votes to impeach him. And it's interesting because the father actually suggests why not just join Toranaga and provide him with our backing since we can deal with him and reason with him. And his higher up is like, no. Essentially, he's going to lose. We're not going to side with the losers. So we see Oichibo with the flashback. She finds out that her father was murdered and she has to flee. And she changes her name from Ruri to Kata no Oichibo, I think is what they say. Lady Oichibo. So we get a play, and this is where they want to use this actor who's a lord to be the 5th regent. The other regents are like, look, we're prisoners here at this point. They're holding us hostage. It is what it is. But we're stuck, and we shouldn't talk bad about them, essentially. We find out that the Taiko had sex with a bunch of consorts, but none of them were producing children. So the implication is that he was either infertile or had very low fertility. And Lady Oichibo is the one who was able to give him a son. Obviously, because of this, her value skyrocketed because she was the only one who could provide him an heir. Lord Ito is the one that they suggested be the 5th regent. Ishido's kissing Oichibo's ass. And they're just wanting to move forward with the impeachment pretty much. They're pretty transparent about it, even with him. Under the guise of restoring peace to the realm, and we saw a little conversation where the heir's teacher is talking to Oichiba, and says, "Is this the end of the peaceful realm that the Taiko desired?" And she's like, "Well, you can never be too safe." So it's all very clearly personal motivations, petty, vengeful, whatever you want to say. So he gets there, gives him an update, lets him know what's going on. Ishido's taken over. Toranaga says that he doesn't want to get involved in this, and hopefully the people will protest. And his second in command suggests Operation Crimson Sky, where pretty much they rush Osaka in one single go, kill all the regents, and start the government over. They're all pushing for Crimson Sky, including his son, who obviously has been overambitious the whole show. And Yabushige is like, attacking Osaka is strangling your own neck. Obviously, it's very difficult to do because it's easily defensible. And his son is like, "You've never lost a battle." And Toranaga's like, "Yeah, because I've never been the first to declare one." So obviously, he's trying to avoid it, or at least giving that appearance. Because this would be a power grab that would make him the sole regent. And they kind of mentioned the word shogun in here a couple times. Obviously, he has his Minowara line, which was the last shogun. So they all really seem to want him to do it, and he keeps resisting. He says, "I've never wanted to be shogun, and I'm not gonna figure out something where we're all not gonna die." And I can't tell if this is all manipulation by him to try to get everyone else to push for him to be shogun so that he can do it without ever coming out and saying that he wants to do it. Because still in that first episode, when they talked about the secret heart, he was the one on the screen. I'm assuming at some point he is going to have a secret that he reveals, whether it's his ambitions or whatever the case is. And this is the stuff that I kind of found a little bit bloated or just uninteresting for this episode. Mariko is negotiating the prostitute. She's there with Fuji. And the prostitute that she ends up negotiating for is the highest one. And it's the one that we saw sleeping with Omi a couple episodes ago. I think I called him Oda the first time. Whoops. And Fuji's always really good in every scene that she's in. The brothel madam, or whatever they're called, says, "I've heard you and the Anjin are never seen apart." And she's very clearly implying that their relationship is more than just translator. And Fuji just like sips her tea and is like, "Don't mind me." And she's kind of implying here that everything that happens at the brothel is secret, and they call it the Willow World and all this stuff. And she really seems to be implying that if Mariko wants to be with John, that's up to her. And that's kind of part of the price that she's negotiating for, is this secrecy. And we can see she's going to have to sleep with John. Omi's really frustrated. I'm kind of wondering at this point if maybe there's more than one spy in the village and it's her. Because obviously she has access to Omi, Yabushige, John, whatever other high-end clientele come into the brothel. And she's trying to essentially comfort Omi and be like, "Look, this is just a job, so don't worry about it." Which I would think if you're dating a prostitute, well, you had to be a lot more understanding than I would. I'll just leave it at that, I guess. I don't think the jealous types would last very long dating hookers, high class or not. John and Mariko are going to the brothel, and he's kind of trying to figure out if he can get out of this. And Mariko's like, "No, it's a gift from Toranaga, and she's super high class, so it would be very insulting if you don't." And John asks Mariko if Toranaga knows about those two, and she says there's nothing to know, which kind of confuses me. Maybe I misinterpreted that scene a couple episodes ago, because it seemed like after Mariko and Fuji said that they sent a courtesan in, that he just believed him and was confused. But this makes it seem like he knows it was Mariko and that they do have a connection, and now she's just in denial of it. So I'm not exactly sure when he figured it out or how, but maybe I'm just a fucking idiot. I don't know. This is all super awkward, but at least there's a little bit of humor here where John's like, "What am I supposed to say?" And Mariko's like, "Tell her she's beautiful." She pours the sake, and she's like, "Compliment her pouring skills. They study this for years. It's considered a rare art." And John's like, "You pour very well." So there is a little bit of humor here with the awkwardness, but a lot of this just feels really elongated for me, I guess. And Kiku, the courtesan, also tells Mariko, "This place is dark if you want it to be dark. It's a private place." She doesn't want to just sit there as another woman suffers. Like, very heavily implying how easy it is to see what she's feeling and thinking. And then she goes and sits behind Mariko. So Mariko's translating all this stuff, and it's about what the Willow World can do for you and make you forget where you're at and your problems and all that kind of thing. And I guess her sitting behind her and making her say this is to try to force her to be the one who sleeps with John instead of doing it herself. Or at least getting Mariko to join in, is what it seems like to me. Kiku asks Mariko if she's going to join him, and she says, "No, it must just be you." And John kind of does this little handhold with Mariko right before he goes. And obviously they're both being put in a position where they're having to do things they don't want to do. And I find it interesting that this show manages to portray a guy not wanting to have sex with a hot chick because it does it very well. But you usually just don't see this kind of thing in media. Apparently, the whole village is waiting to see if John got laid and how it went. Based on the expressions and kind of interactions between the two, it seems like they did do it, and it just kind of is what it is. But Kiku does shoot Omi a look here that's kind of like, it's just a job. Not really too much else to say about it. It's just kind of an awkward scene, and no one actually looks happy. Everyone's just going through the obligations that they have to, is how it seems to me at least. Again, just another little thing where he's communicating a lot just by looking at Mariko without saying anything. And you can see they all look pretty unhappy about the situation. Mariko has to report in, tell Toranaga it went well. And Toranaga is trying to find out how much Mariko remembers about her childhood and Lady Oichiba. And she says that she only knew her as Ruri and then never saw her again. And he's trying to figure out her motivations. And Mariko says men go to war for different reasons than women. Men can do it for conquest or glory, pride, power, whatever. But women are simply at war. And she's alluding to the fact that they're just constantly being oppressed and attacked all the time in this society. And Mariko seems pretty salty because Toranaga's like, your father wished you'd been a boy. Essentially, say he could have been ambitious with you. And she's like, well, then he should have married me better. Which is a pretty bitchy thing to say, even if she's right. And Toranaga explains to her that her dad sent her away to be as far away from the fight as possible so that she would live. And then if she wanted to, she could return for revenge one day. And she didn't realize it until just now. Ishido's trying to force the vote to get Lord Ito as the 5th regent. And one of them says, no, not until you release all the hostages. Oichiba explains to Ishido why she hates Toranaga because she ignored that question before. And she essentially says that he's really subtle, but he's always planning and plotting and scheming. And even though he wasn't the one that killed my dad, he was the one who planned it and who's responsible for it. And that's why she hates him so much. And then right now, you guys are just all being outplayed because you're not smart enough. The regent tries to escape, and Ishido's waiting on them, and obviously just cuts them all down. And they use the excuse of bandits again that killed Sugiyama, so now they need another regent that they have to replace. Toranaga says Crimson Sky it is, because Ishido is going to control the entire council soon, so they're going to obliterate Osaka is the plan now. So it seems to me like he's just been playing his cards right the whole time to get himself in position to take power, and not admitting to anyone that that's what he was going to do eventually. Especially given what Oichiba just said about him in the previous scene. That's it for this episode. There's definitely stuff that happens, but for me, this one just felt like it could have been accomplished in like 20 minutes, but it lasted almost an hour. So I'm hoping we pick back up next week. It wasn't a bad episode. It just felt like kind of a weird sidestep for the most part when the plot was just progressing along nicely. And now we're getting to the point where we've had 6 episodes of build up and you want to start to see the payoffs for the big stuff. So I'm not going to go any longer than that. If you watch the episode, let me know what you think. I try to respond to the comments, like and subscribe and all that. Thanks. See ya.